Hey beautiful, welcome to Dr. Sarah's Cafe. I have been wanting to make this video for several weeks now, all about how to protect yourself from spiritual scams. This will be very practical advice about what you can do before, during, and after you book a session with a tarot reader, an astrologer, or some other spiritual consultant or spiritual practitioner. Part of the reason I wanted to make this is because the spiritual community, spiritual services gets stigmatized. It gets sort of a bad rep because of a few bad apples. But there are a few things I want to keep in mind before I jump into the specific practices and things you can do. And I want to start with the idea that not every reader or spiritual practitioner is for you, even when they are legit. And so just because you don't have a great experience or an ideal experience with a spiritual practitioner, that doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have skills, that they don't have clairaudience or clairvoyance or some other ability. It just might mean it's a mismatch for you working with that person. And so keep in mind that you're looking for the right spiritual practitioners for you and not just saying, oh, do they get results for other people? And my second point sort of elaborates on this a little bit. Think of hiring a spiritual practitioner like a tarot reader or astrologer or a Reiki practitioner the same way you would think about hiring other service providers. And so you have lots of doctors, lots of lawyers who have been trained, who have legitimate skills, and who have gotten really good results for other people. And yet they might not be the right doctor or lawyer for you. They might not be a great fit for you, even if they are very valid, legitimate, and successful in their careers and know exactly what they're doing. It's okay if there's a top ranked doctor or lawyer in your town and you're like, yeah, but I prefer this doctor or lawyer over here just because we mesh a little bit better, we vibe a little bit better. I like their bedside manner, I like the vibe of their office, I like their office staff, right? So there are so many reasons to choose one service provider over another that don't necessarily speak to their actual skill, knowledge, or competency. And I'm also doing the comparison to other service providers because of the stigma of people saying, oh, spiritual stuff is just a scam. And when you realize that there are lawyers and doctors and accountants who scam people, there are preachers of Catholic churches and Protestant churches and Baptist churches, and there are school teachers and principals, and there are plumbers and electricians and contractors. Scammers run the gamut in terms of the field or the work that they do. And so yes, there are definitely people who use spiritual ideas and principles and spiritual services to take advantage of people, to manipulate people for their own gain, but that can happen in any service. That can happen in any arena of life. It can happen romantically. It can happen platonically with friends who want to con you out of your resources and your time and your money. And so I think it's good to always be discerning no matter what you're going into. So let's begin with the things you can do before you even book the session. The first thing you can do is get to know their brand beforehand. And a lot of people have a website, a lot of people have reviews, and a lot of people these days have a social media presence. And so get familiar with their website at the least, reviews, testimonials, but also see if they have a digital footprint elsewhere, such as YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, right? And so you can get a feel for their vibe, check the comments that other people are leaving. Does their work resonate with people? Do you resonate with their work? So if you watch a few YouTube videos and you're like, yeah, this is way off base, then you would know already not to hire that person. The second thing is get familiar with the vocabulary. So one thing that helps me and has helped me if I seek a tarot reading is that I know enough basic tarot knowledge to know if something's an outright lie. A certain level of research will at least give you enough knowledge and information to ask the right questions. If you don't know anything, if you've not done any research, you won't even know what red flags to look for, okay? And so just like if you're going to the doctor or consulting a lawyer, you don't have to have degrees in those fields, but you have enough knowledge to be able to ask follow-up questions, to ask clarifying questions, to ask things or bring up things that the doctor or lawyer might not give away immediately or just on their own. This third thing has a lot to do with understanding yourself. So I recommend avoiding a brand new reader or consultation when you're emotionally compromised. Now, of course, this is just advice, just tips. It depends on your unique situation. Maybe you have a really, really close friend who's a practitioner that you trust with your life, or maybe they recommend someone, and because you know your friend or your sibling or your relative inside and out, you can trust their recommendation in your time of need. But and generally speaking, right, you want to maybe book a session when you're feeling great, right? If you think somewhere down the line you want to have a tarot reader or an astrologer or a Reiki practitioner on deck for trying times or troubling times or for a crisis in your life, consider getting to know their practice and getting acclimated to them as a service provider when you're having a good moment in life, when things are going well in your life, when you are not experiencing some type of distress. And that way you get to know them and build that trust during a time when you're in the right frame of mind and you're emotionally clear-headed enough to pick up on any warning signs. The fourth thing you can do before a session is to get clear on why you want a reading. This is super, super important. If you want a reading to escape your reality, then reconsider your intention and your objective for the reading. If you want a reading for additional clarification, for a little bit of support, a little bit of coaching, a little bit of guidance, insights into things that you might not be able to see or discern for yourself, that could be a good sign. But if you want a reading to make your crush fall in love with you, or if you want a reading to figure out how you can make $10 million without doing any work, right? If you're trying to get a reading to seek revenge on someone, right? Like just less than healthy, maybe unethical intentions on your part, just be clear about that. And a lot of times that takes deep courage and self-awareness to be honest about what we're seeking in these sessions. But it's very important if you don't want to make yourself susceptible to scams. And again, this is not just with spiritual practices, but with any kind of service provider. If you're trying to take the easy way out on something, then you make yourself more susceptible to being scammed. The fifth thing is, of course, the most important thing, is practicing your own intuitive skills, your own intuitive abilities. The most important thing you can do before seeking a spiritual service or consultation is to learn how to trust your own gut. Learn how to strengthen and tap into your own intuition and your ability to access higher knowledge and wisdom. And again, I use the analogy of going to a doctor or seeking a lawyer because yes, we can eat healthy and exercise, but sometimes it is good to have a trained professional support us in our wellness journey, right? And so you wouldn't say don't consult a doctor because you can take good care of yourself. So in the same way that yes, we can get all our own information, get all our own knowledge, but it's also okay to seek a spiritual professional in some realm of your life because you want the support, because you want a different perspective, because they might have a different spiritual gift than you have, right? This will empower you and make you more discerning once you get into the session itself, which is our next section or chapter of advice. During the session, some things you can do. First, is to realize or understand that you notice for a reason. You noticed it for a reason. I've been in some scenarios of all sorts, from academic, professional, spiritual, romantic, platonic, where you pick up on a facial expression. You pick up on an intonation in their voice. You pick up on something hanging on their wall. You pick up on a gesture, or someone walking into a room, or some item on their desk or in the chair, right? You notice these things for a reason, even the temperature of the room. If you noticed it, if you clocked it when you walk into that session or log on to that session, just acknowledge that you noticed it for a reason. Now, it doesn't mean you noticed it for a bad reason or for a good reason or some other information or insight that is important, but just accept the fact that if you're practicing your intuition, even if you're not practicing your intuition, to be honest, you're going to notice things that your subconscious, that your spiritual team are trying to inform you about, right? For various reasons. It doesn't mean that you noticed it, oh, so it must be bad. It could mean that you noticed it because it's going to help you understand something they say later in the reading, okay? The second thing is judging for yourself, making the discernment, the observation of whether or not this consultant or this professional is taking it seriously. Just like you wouldn't trust a dentist that doesn't have clean tools, you wouldn't necessarily trust a spiritual practitioner who doesn't have clean tools, who doesn't clean their space, who doesn't seem like they take good care of their cards or their physical environment, right? And not just the physical environment, like the cleanliness of it, but are they punctual? Are they showing up on time? Do they communicate effectively? Are they generous? Are they welcoming and inviting? Do they provide good customer service, right? And so is this person taking the consultation seriously? Do they act like a professional? That could be a sign. And, some people might say, well, I know people who are really great and they are totally casual. They show up late, but they get results. And if that works for you, that's totally fine. But for newer people, for people who are not as familiar with the person they're working with, or who might be trying a spiritual service for the first time, I'll just put that out there as one way to avoid a potential scam or sketchy situation. Third, observe yourself. During the session, as the person is speaking, as they're talking, observe your physical sensations. Does your heart start to race? Does it trigger a memory? Do your palms start sweating? Do you have a tinge of self-doubt or doubt of what they're saying? Just observe. And again, it's not to say that what you observe and how you're reacting or responding means that what they're saying is wrong. It could just mean that what they're saying is triggering, right? They could say things that are scratching below the surface, and that might create a reaction in you. But also, depending on what the reaction is, it could indicate that maybe it's false, what they're saying, or maybe you're picking up on ill intent on their part, right? And so you will have to discern for yourself what you're observing and feeling and how you're reacting and why. Fourth thing you can do during a session is to avoid over-explaining. Now, sometimes, I'll say every practitioner is different. Keep that in mind. So some don't want you to say anything. They don't want you to give away any information. They don't want to know anything about you. They just deliver the reading. And then maybe at the end, once they've got everything out, they'll say, how does that resonate? Do you have any questions? Other readers I've seen, equally legit, ask questions during the reading so that it helps them understand the downloads that they're getting, or it helps them understand some piece of information that's coming in for them so that they can provide more clarity to you. If they do ask a question, you don't have to tell your whole backstory. You don't have to tell your whole life story. You don't want to be giving them a reading. Now, this fifth thing helps if you have done your research or if you've studied the vocabulary a little bit beforehand, but knowing if there's anything that's obviously wrong. So again, if you know some basic terminology about astrology, basic terminology about tarot, that can help you. Like if they're reading a card and it just seems way off base, that could be a sign that they either don't know what they're doing, or they're trying to scam, or just have bad intentions. And I will say too that a lot of this comes from media. I remember watching a movie. It was a very interesting movie, but in the reading, one of the characters pulled tarot cards, and they pulled the Hanged Man 3 times. They pulled the Hanged Man, and they pulled another card, and it was another Hanged Man, and they pulled a third card, and it was another Hanged Man, and it was this ominous bad omen, like, oh my gosh, something terrible is going to happen to you. You got 3 hanged men in a row. So me, having studied tarot by that point, I knew one, most tarot decks don't have 3 of the same card. Most tarot decks will not have 3 hanged man cards in them, right? So I was like, okay, they're doing it for dramatic effect for the movie. Also, if you understand tarot, you know that the hanged man is actually not an ominous card. It does not indicate death or tragedy or calamity or bad omens or anything like that. But it can sound, right? It sounds bad. It sounds like, oh my gosh, the hanged man. And so if you don't know that it doesn't mean anything bad, then someone who has negative intentions or ill intent can sort of fearmonger in that way. Also, with this 5th tip, is anything obviously wrong? Think about things that are obviously wrong with you. So if they say something about you, or they say something about your life story or your intentions or your desires or your hopes or your dreams that's obviously wrong, then note that. Just pay attention, like, okay, that's obviously wrong. Also pay attention to how or if they're willing to correct themselves once they understand that something's not quite accurate. But if they're saying things with absolute certainty and you know that that thing is absolutely wrong, then one, you know that it might be the last time you book a session with them. But two, you might also say that in the session, like, that's actually not correct. That's not accurate. And how they respond to you giving that feedback can tell you a lot as well. Now, the sixth thing is directly connected to the seventh thing. So I'll share them on the screen at the same time. One, is it giving prosperity gospel cliches? Or on the flip side, are they fear mongering? So what I mean when I say prosperity gospel cliches is if the only thing they're telling you in the reading is that you're going to make a lot of money, all your dreams are going to come true, you're going to find the love of your life, if every detail that they say is about you winning and having no obstacles, no hurdles in your way, no work that you have to do personally, nothing that you have to figure out or heal within yourself, if it's all just empty platitudes about how these blessings are going to fall in your lap without any effort on your part, any work that you have to do on yourself to bring those things in, or any work that you have to do to cultivate those things in your life, that's a sign of prosperity gospel cliches. Another thing that I have actually witnessed when it comes to what I'm calling prosperity gospel cliches is that people will just start offering all this good stuff happening in my life without considering if it's actually something I want, right? So they're making the assumption that, like, oh, you're going to live in a big mansion and you're going to be driving a fancy car and your lifestyle is going to completely change, right? And they're just saying all these cliche things that they think people might want in their life, and they haven't actually matched it to or aligned it to like where you are and what your desires are and what your authentic goals might be. Okay, so look for that. Look if they're just saying generic things that many people might be happy to hear and it doesn't feel specific to your unique dream or desire. That could be a red flag as well. And then, as I mentioned, the flip side or the other side of that coin is if they are making it seem like there's total catastrophe in your life and you're doomed to some unavoidable tragedy unless you pay extra money for them to go do some ceremony, some remote ceremony on your behalf. And so that brings me to the eighth point, which is avoid upsells in the moment. Avoid upsells in the moment. So this is a very classic one. It's almost like I'm going to fearmonger and tell you all these problems and these troubles, or I'm going to give you these prosperity gospel cliches. And then I'm going to say, in order to solidify these blessings in your life, you need to pay me an extra fee so that I can go buy these tools and go do this ritual at the altar, tomorrow. Or this tragedy is going to happen, or you're going to be doomed with this curse forever unless you give me extra money to go buy these candles and these ritualistic tools to go perform this ceremony at the altar, right? And so even if ultimately you decide to go forward with those ceremonies, give yourself some time to think about it, right? Don't just automatically or have a knee-jerk response to say, yes, 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 I want to buy more. I want to give you more of my money to go do the ceremony to solidify or guarantee the blessings that you just promised me in this reading. And that brings me to the last chapter, which is what to do after this session. The first thing you can do after getting a spiritual session, whether it's Reiki, tarot, hands-on healing, remote healing, astrology readings, whatever spiritual practices you're seeking, wait before booking again. You need time to process and apply and observe what plays out based on the reading you got, based on the service that you got, right? So you want to give it time to see what pans out, what turns out to be true, what turns out to be helpful, right? And so one thing you can do is to journal or track your experiences. So I recommend immediately after the session, journal about it. Reflect on what you felt, what you noticed, what you think you might apply in your life going forward, but also in the days, weeks, months, sometimes years following that session, track what pans out, what comes to pass, how has that session started to show up in your life and become applicable in your everyday life or in a particular situation. And You won't have time or space to do that if you're trying to book another session and book another session like every day or every week. Give it space, because a lot of times these sessions speak to or relate to larger cycles of time and not just the immediate moment. And part of your reflection can be about what resonated and what did not resonate. And so just be very clear about that. And it's okay if there are certain things that were off or certain details that were not specifically accurate. The goal of a reading is not 100% accuracy of every fine, minute detail in your life. The goal of a service or a reading, such as a tarot or astrology reading, is to say, here's the most helpful insight. Here's what you need to know to help you in this circumstance, to help you in this goal or ambition you have for your life, to help you in this healing process, right? If they don't get the name of the childhood pet correct, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're a fluke or a snake oil salesman, right? Because you have to ask yourself the question, does them being able to tell me the name of the dog I had when I was 5 is that actually going to help me with the reason I came to this reading or this session with? The fourth thing you can do after is to give the consultant feedback. This is super helpful. Any consultant who's genuinely trying to serve people is going to want to know if their service helped you, right? So if they really want to help you, it's going to be valuable to them as well as other people who might use them in the future to know, hey, does this actually help you? Has this actually served you well in some way? Let me know so that I can refine and hone my practice and be a better service provider for other people in the future. But also, if you really did enjoy their service, leaving that review, leaving that feedback on their website or on Yelp or some other Google review site, that can also help the community. It can help the other collective of people who are looking for valuable spiritual services. So speaking of doing your own research, getting familiar with the vocabulary before you book a session, I have a couple of videos where I start to teach you some astrological and tarot principles, specifically when you're going through a transition in life, when you're going through some type of pivot or change. You can check those videos out on either side of the screen here or in the description box below. And I hope to see you in another video. Take care.